Namaste Hari IRG from Santa Maria. Thank you for joining. LK Kanpal from New Delhi, Malini from New Jersey, Shanji from Toronto, Kumuji from Boston. Thank you all for joining today's webinar on the Sadhana Panchakam with Dr. Venkatraman Swaminathan. Let's get started. And so as the director of outreach for Hindu University of America, I've been doing so many webinars, and every week I get to learn about itihasas and scriptures and so much of our own history. And today we're going to look into the Sadhana Panchakam. It's a Prakarna text attributed to Adi Shankaraji, focusing on the means to achieve liberation or moksha, kind of one of those foundational ideas, right? Also referred to as Sopna Panchakam. The text presents its teachings in a gradual, step-by-step manner, much like climbing a ladder. Comprising 5 concise verses, it serves as a popular Panchaka, providing spiritual aspirants with clear instructions for attaining self-realization. And so we're going to explore this insightful text with Dr. Venkatraman, who's going to guide you and participants through some of the general teachings and practical applications for spiritual growth. Again, thank you all for joining today's webinar. We got Satish Damle, a regular, joining from Atlanta. I got the poll going. Let us know if you're interested in taking a course at HOA, if you've taken a course, or if this is your first webinar. Let me now introduce our faculty and special guest, regular guest now, stalwart of HUA, or at least becoming Dr. Venkatraman Swaminathan. He obtained his doctorate in material science from the University of Southern California in 1975. He worked at Bell Laboratories for 21 years in many aspects of fiber optic communication systems and fiber to home technologies, partly why we can do what we're doing at Hindu University of America online and connecting so many people. Dr. Swaminathan is a fellow of the Institution of Electronics and Electrical Engineers and the American Electrochemical Societies. He's authored over 160 publications in peer-reviewed journals, 4 books. He's got 8 patents, many professional awards and accolades. But it's after his retirement as a scientist, Dr. Swaminathan has gotten more onto the path of Dharma. Well, he's always been, but he has been a student of Pujya Swami Dayananda Saraswati and other many revered acharyas at the Arsha Vidya Gurukulam for 30 years. So he's been doing this in parallel, not after retirement. And the specific book that he's written, he's collected 365 quotes of Pujya Swamiji and published them as Day After Day with Swami Dayananda Saraswati. He's edited other books and works in this space as well. So with that introduction, let me hand it to Dr. Venkatraman Swaminathan for our webinar on the Sadhana Panchakam. Dr. Swaminathan?
Okay. Namaste. Thank you very much, Ankurji. Namaste to all of you. Greetings from Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. So I'm very happy to be part of this webinar and able to talk to you about an important text considered as a Prakarana Grantha. Prakarana Grantha means an independent text, not necessarily of the Upanishads or Brahma Sutra or Bhagavad Gita, but an independent text which nevertheless has something to convey, a special topic. Doesn't convey everything, but it just takes a particular topic and addresses the topic. So in that sense, Sadhana Panchakam is considered an important text. So I will start with my usual prayers before I begin a class. So I will do that now. Om Gananahan Tva Ganapatigum Havamaghe Kavim Kavinam Upamashravastamam Jeshtarajam Brahmanam Brahmanaspadana Shrunvan Udhibeshri Dasadanam Mahaganapataye Namaha. Om Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavat Pada Shankaram Loka Shankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashya Krutau Vante Bhagavantah Punah Punaha Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavat Dehaya Dakshina Murtaye Namaha Sada Siva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Parihantam Vande Guru Paramparam Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahaihi Om Shanti 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 Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langhede Girim Yatkrpatamaham Mande Paramananda Madhavam Yatkrpatamaham Mande Shri Dayananda Sadgurum Yatkrpatamaham Vande Sadgurum Chandrasekharam Om. The Sadhana Panchakam, this text is also known by other names. It's also called Upadesha Panchakam, Sopana Panchakam. As Ankurji was saying, Sopana means a ladder. So it describes various steps one has to climb in order to reach the goal of self-knowledge. It's also called Advaita Panchakam, since the essential connection of this text is to the topic of oneness, the absolute reality, the oneness notwithstanding the diversity that one perceives. So it's also called Advaita Panchakam. A Panchakam means a text with 5 verses. That anything with 5 verses is called a Panchakam. Like if it has 6, it will be a Shatkam. If it has 8, it will be Ashtakam. Like this, here it is a Panchakam consisting of 5 verses. The importance of a text in the tradition is also attested by the commentaries that the text attracts. And it's very interesting that notwithstanding that it is only 5 verses, this text has 3 commentaries. There is a Ratna Prabha Tika. Tika means a commentary. Sri Sadashiva Pancharatna Karika. Karika in the form of verses themselves, but the verses serving as a commentary to the set of 5 verses. Then there is Sri Bala Krishnananda Saraswati Kiranavali, another commentary on this Sadhana Panchakam. So you can see that albeit its smaller size, namely only 5 verses, the profundity of the verses are such that 3 different commentaries have been written on this topic, and those commentaries fortunately are available. So if one studies this text, it'll customarily one will study with the commentary. And in the course, if we teach this class in the fall with enough registration and so on, then I will be doing with a commentary only, particularly the commentary of Sri Krishnananda Saraswati Kiranavali. So it is always a good practice to study a text with a commentary if the commentary or commentaries are available. So that is Panchakam. Then Sadhana. Sadhana sadhyate anena iti sadhyam. Means a means to an end. Sadhana means a means. Since it is a means to an end, there has to be an end. So sadhya is a desired end. So sadhana is the means, sadhya is the end. And of course, the end is desired by someone. And that person is called a sadhaka. Sadhaka is the one who is trying to achieve a desired end. and he will employ a sadhana, a appropriate means. So the seeker, that is the sadhaka, connects himself or herself with the desired end, sadhya, through the means sadhana. Just like a pole vault jumper would use a pole as the means to cross the vault, and that is the end. So sadhaka, sadhana, sadhya, sambandha, connection has to be there. So one can achieve a desired end using an appropriate means to that end. Now, if you look at human life is really a series of sadhyas or ends. Some of them have been achieved and some of them are yet to be achieved. So the whole life is spent in terms of achieving various ends through various means, and sometimes not necessarily all the desired ends are achieved. And the means should always be appropriate to the ends. Otherwise, one will not be successful in achieving the end. But endowed with the faculty of choice, a human being can choose the means that is not only appropriate for the end, but also the right means. So right and appropriate. So the right and appropriate combination is one of the prerogatives of a human being as opposed to animals. Animals also have various desires, and they also seek those desires as desirable ends. But being programmed, as we observe them, being programmed, they do not necessarily, you can question their means, because they will be to some extent appropriate. Whether right or wrong, that dichotomy is not faced by an animal as opposed to a human being. So it is very important in the case of the human being, because of the faculty of thinking that the human being is endowed with, one then chooses not only an appropriate means, but also deliberates whether it is the right means. So right and appropriate are governing the choice of means to acquire the end. So now here, if you look at the various things that human beings seek, you can broadly classify them into two categories. There are two types of seeking. There is seeking desirable things which one does not have. So I don't have something, then I seek it. So seeking desirable things which we don't have. Then the second type of seeking is seeking the things which we already have, but we think that we don't have. So kind of a notional seeking, if you will. And a good example of this would be somebody having their eyeglasses on their forehead, but still searching for the eyeglass. So the person thinks that he or she doesn't have the eyeglass, but really, for the time being, that person has forgotten or not aware that the sunglasses are on him or her already. So forgetting these sunglasses or e-reading glasses on the forehead is an example of seeking something which we have already, but we think we don't have. So while these two types of seeking are there, the human pursuits themselves also, interestingly, fall under two categories. We are generalizing in a way so that we can reduce the number of variables that we have to reckon with. So the human pursuits are broadly divided into two categories. We want to acquire something which we don't have, or we want to get rid of something that we have, but we don't need it. We want to get rid of them, like the clutter in the house. And of course, there are legitimate things that we need, we seek. So we want to acquire upadeya, or we want to shed from us heya. So the lifetime of human pursuits are always spent in these two categories, upadeya or heya. Upadeya to acquire, heya to get rid of. And in this, then there is this underlying principle of seeking something we don't have, then also seeking things which we already have, but we feel or we notionally think that we don't have. Now, no matter that we have these padeya and heya pursuits, acquiring and getting rid of, if we go further, if we go deeper and start interrogating ourselves or introspecting ourselves, exactly with whatever I seek, what is the background of that seeking? What is that really drives me to seek something? I label something as a desirable, then I seek it. But is that alone? Is that drive alone makes me seek? Or is there something underlying? Is there something more fundamental? And if you deliberate on this very quickly, we can arrive at that the fundamental human pursuit is to gain unconditional happiness. Happiness at all circumstances, all times and places. No matter what the situation warrants, we want to be happy. A happiness which is not perturbed by a time and place or event and so on. Now, in this regard, in the fundamental human pursuit of happiness, the common end which is sought by everyone is freedom from a sense of lack, a sense of limitedness, a sense of inadequacy. We don't want to have a sense of lack. That's why we desire. Then once a desire is there, then we want to fulfill that desire. So we do whatever we need to do to gain that desirable end. But all that is driven by a sense of lack, a lack which is centered on the self, a sense of inadequacy that is centered on the self. There is a famous saying conveyed through a story in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad belonging to the Shukla Yajurveda. There, the sage Yajnavalkya, he was a grihastha, a married person, and he decided one day that he wanted to pursue the sannyasa ashrama, the life of a renunciate, for the purpose of contemplating on the self, to firm up his knowledge of the self, which he already has, but he wants to get an abidance, a nishtha in that knowledge. So he wants to retire to the forest from his household duties or the household ashrama. So he tells his wife Maitreyi, he has two wives, Katyayini and Maitreyi, and he divides whatever inheritance wealth he has among those two, and then leaves. And at the time he was leaving, Maitreyi, one of the wives, stops him and asks him, "Hey Maharishi, you are going to the forest for what purpose?" He replies, "I want to get abidance in the self-knowledge." Then she asks, "All the wealth that you have left for me, with that wealth, will I be able to achieve that abidance on the fullness or the knowledge of the self, on that absolute reality that you are going to the forest to contemplate on, leaving behind me the wealth, but with that wealth, will I be able to gain what is that you are going to gain by retiring to the forest?" And to this, Yajnavalkya doesn't have an answer. He tells her honestly that she cannot gain the same through wealth. Then she asks him, "What is that I have to do to gain the same thing that you are going to gain by taking the sannyas ashrama and going to the forest?" And he teaches her. There is an Upadesha in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, but a fundamental human trait that comes out of that Upadesha, that teaching, is that Yajnavalkya tells his wife Maitreyi, knowingly or unknowingly, a human being seeks only the pleased and complete self. Atmanastu kamaya sarvam priyam bhavati. If you desire something that you say it is dear to you, or you desire something and you say that you want to gain this, but all these activities which are the upadeya, acquiring, are things which you want to get rid of so that you will be happy by getting rid of them, really because of you like the pleased self, the comfortable self. And the pleased self is the one behind all the human pursuits, whether it is upadeya or heya. So this fundamental Upadesha teaching comes out of this teaching of Yajnavalkya Maharishi to his wife Maitreyi. So therefore, if we re-examine this human pursuit, we can say we experiencing oneself through the Newtonian screen of space and time. One concludes that one is limited, one is inadequate. This is a normally abnormal conclusion. Normally because everyone makes the same conclusion. So we are in the majority in that sense. But this is an abnormal conclusion, for the fact being the self is beyond the Newtonian screen of space and time. The self is already full, it is already adequate, it is already the whole, complete, limitless self. But that fact is not known to me at this present time, therefore I seek. So it is a normally abnormal conclusion. So in the vision of Vedanta, what does it say about happiness that I seek? Happiness is not an object or an attribute. It is not an object like an apple, a house, a car, or whatever. Nor it is an attribute like the redness of the rose. It's not a particular time or place. Happiness is really oneself alone, the self, the Atma, that is already in the form of, it is happiness. Happiness is its nature. Happiness is its reality. And that reality, for the time being, is not known to me. This error that one makes about oneself is like the error of having the glasses on my forehead, but looking for them. So this is what we say, missing the obvious. The pursuit of happiness is therefore exactly like looking for the missing glasses on one's forehead. Now, in this juncture, to illustrate this missing the obvious through a very famous conversation between Sherlock Holmes and his dear friend and colleague, Dr. Watson. These two gentlemen are camping, went on a camping trip and pitched their tent under the stars. In the middle of the night, Holmes wakes up and gives Dr. Watson a nudge. Dear Watson, look up in the sky and tell me what you see. Watson replies, I see millions of stars, Holmes. And what do you conclude from that, Watson? Watson thinks for a moment and says, well, astronomically, it tells me that there are millions of galaxies and potentially billions of planets. Astrologically, I observe that the star Saturn is in the Leo. Horologically, I deduce that the time is approximately 3:15. Meteorologically, I suspect that we'll have a beautiful day tomorrow. Oh, what does it tell you, Holmes? Holmes replies, my dear Watson, you idiot, somebody stole our tent. So that is the fact. But Mr. Watson forgot the obvious. So this is the missing the obvious. Having this, having already what are not recognizing the situation that we are in, we are searching for something all over the place, or placing our judgments on places, on misplaced judgments on variety of things which are of immaterial. So really, the statement, the problem statement, can simply be put in this following manner. I am the problem, namely I am the solution. I am already the full, complete, self-sufficient self, but I am the problem because missing that fact, I look for happiness outside of myself, then spend my entire life pursuing various things or avoiding various things and so on. So if the problem of seeing myself as a wanting person, seeking happiness is centered on me, then the solution also must be centered on me. So the correction of the notional error, it's not correction of an actual error, correction of a notional error is required. Since it is an error of the self centered on the self, it's an error made about the self, this notional error. In order for the correction of that notional error, a cognitive change is required. So now let us examine what this cognitive change entails. What does it mean? So we go back to our beginning proposition that there is a sadhana, a means, and there is a sadhya, an end. Then sadhana, sadhya, sambandha. If the end is outside of me, then I use an right and appropriate means to gain that end, which is outside of me, which is not me. So that there the means and end are different. But here we have a special situation for this cognitive change, namely the means, which is going to correct the notional error about the self. So I gain the self, the end. So means itself is the end, as opposed to means different from the end. So this is a very peculiar situation. And so this is example would be like Hanumanji going to get the Sanjaya mountains to save the fallen Lakshmana in the battlefield. So gaining that which is physically separated, apraptasya, it is not with me now, it is separated in time and place, that it is physically separated, apraptasya, one has to make an effort in terms of various actions to close that separation, to gain that end. So this is called apraptasya praptihi. It is not there with me now, it is separated from me by time and place. I have to make an adequate effort to gain this. As opposed to the this Hanumanji going and getting the Sanjaya mountain, the glasses on my forehead is a different problem. Here it is not separated from me time and place. So it is already prapta. I already have it. It's a prapta vishaya. Praptasya, but separated from me only by ignorance. It's a notional separation, not the Newtonian separation. It is not separated by space and time, but notionally, because of the error that I have made, it is separated. So this, if I gain this, it is praptasya praptihi, and for this is where the cognitive change is required. Because this is in the form of an ignorance, this notional error. Ignorance can be removed only by its knowledge. Therefore, knowledge is the means as well as the end when the seeker and the sought are one and the same. What we seek, but we seek not ourselves. We seek what is outside of ourselves because of this notional error. So now, for this idea so far that I have described, there seems to be the possibility that the happiness that I seek is perhaps not coming from outside. It's not an object. It's neither an attribute. It is never separated from me time and space wise. It is probably centered on me. That possibility can be confirmed by one data point that we all have. We all experience that data point in every day of our life, the sleep experience. So if you analyze the sleep experience, the fellow is awake, he goes to sleep, he dreams whatever things that are there in his samskara, in his impressions, he dreams about them. Then he goes to this deep sleep where his body, mind, which are available in the waking state, are all not there for him in the deep sleep. Nevertheless, when this fellow wakes up the next day morning, he says, I slept happily. Sleep seems to be a happy experience for everyone, including animals for that matter. But were there any cognition of objects in the objective world? Was there a cognition of the objective world in the sleep? The answer is no. Was the person aware of the Newtonian constraints of time and space? The answer is no. Still, the experience was happy experience. Unless that experience was a happy experience, he cannot recollect that experience when he wakes up and say, I slept happily. Therefore, this one data point, every day it is available. Every day one goes through this experience. Then this data point shows that the self can be happy in the absence of the outside world. It doesn't have to depend upon any object of the world. It doesn't have to satisfy any condition of time-space closure. Therefore, it is a possibility strengthened by the experience, everyday experience, that happiness could be centered on me itself. And I'm not recognizing that fact. I'm seeking this happiness outside of me. So therefore, now I need a means of knowledge, an appropriate means of knowledge to know or to correct this error. So the inquiry of Vedanta as a means of knowledge to correct the notional error of oneself. And the natural progression here is what we say the self-inquiry. And for the self-inquiry, there has to be clarity in what is the means of knowledge I choose, what is the object of that knowledge, because I need to know myself. Vedanta is the means of knowledge, and the prayojanam is to discover this complete, full, whole, limited self, which is I am. So therefore, this clarity is this first step in this 3 the triad pramana, prameya, prayojanam, I first gain clarity about the purpose of why I am inquiring, because I seek freedom, I seek unconditional happiness. That clarity should lead me to the clarity with a reference to the prameya, namely the self itself, the object of knowledge, that knowing that self is already, we have to know that the self is already complete and whole. With that clarity, I should examine the scriptures, which are the means of knowledge, the pramana. Now, when we examine any pramana, any means of knowledge, there are two things that need to be fulfilled. There's a necessary and there is a sufficiency condition. So both those conditions have to be satisfied. To illustrate this with an example, eyes are the pramana, the means of knowledge. For gaining the knowledge of a form, of any object, we need to understand the rupa, the form, for which eyes is what is we are endowed with to know the form. But the point is, there should be sufficient light for, even if the eyes are open, the object of knowledge is available, but if the room is dark, we are not going to be able to see anything. The eyes are functioning, objects are there, but I won't see anything unless there is light. So while the eyes as the pramana is the necessary condition, light is the sufficient condition. So both the necessary and the sufficient conditions ought to be present in order for a means of knowledge to give rise to the prayojanam, the purpose or the final end. So Vedanta as a pramana is the necessary condition only. It is not the sufficient, it doesn't satisfy the sufficiency condition, but it satisfies as a means of knowledge. Any scripture is the necessary condition. And what is the sufficiency condition? The mental preparedness is the sufficiency condition. So this the mental preparedness is required, the appropriate preparedness is required for a cognitive change, for the correction of this notional error. Like in the case of the example of the guy with these glasses on his forehead looking for that, somebody in the house, his wife or son or somebody will come and say, hey, you have the glasses on your forehead. At that time, this fellow should have a mental preparedness to accept to have trust in the words of whoever tells him, hey, you have the glasses on your forehead. So that there in that example, that is the preparedness. So here, in the case of self-inquiry, a whole set of preparedness is required, and those preparedness of the mind are the sufficiency condition for the cognitive change to take place. So this is where the Sadhana Panchakam comes in. Sadhana Panchakam in the 5 verses prescribes 40 values to learn and practice for gaining the mental preparedness for self-knowledge. One need not be alarmed about the fact, oh, there are so many values that I have to practice in order to gain this knowledge of the self, that the self is whole and complete, etc. The answer is, one need not be frightened by this. Even if you start developing a few values, this is like the spaghetti. You can't take one spaghetti in the fork. When you take a few spaghettis will come together. So the spaghetti effect. So if you practice a few values, then there is going to be a feedback and it will accelerate the development of the other values. So in this sense, these 40 values are interlinked values that the Sadhana Panchakam talks about. Simply put, these are the do's and don'ts for self-inquiry. So this is the mental preparedness, satisfying the self, satisfying the sufficiency condition required for a cognitive change. So in this course, this is what we are going to be doing, is to examine these 40 values enumerated in the 5 verses of the text. And we will show, in discussing the insights not only the insights behind every value that is necessary for spiritual growth, but we will also show the link, the interlink between these values, so that, as I said a few minutes ago, that developing a few accelerates the development of the further values. So it's kind of a connected 40 verses, each one contributing to the acquisition of the other. And we have to recognize these values that are relevant in the 4 stages of human life. In our Shastra, the human life is divided into 4 stages just to describe the station in life that one will be placed during a course of life. Like the beginning, one is a student learning, then one becomes a grahastha, an householder, then one is retiring to contemplate more about the realities of life, and finally one renounces everything to get an abidance in the knowledge of oneself. So these are the 4 stages that the Vedic system prescribes, and the values that are described in the Sadhana Panchakam are also a progression of the human life in the spread across these 4 stations of life. So, but through them, we will also discern the Vedantic vision. The Vedantic vision is the self is already complete, it's already whole, it is already Purnam. So that fact, this which was not known to me because of my own assumptions, my own idiosyncrasies, my own falsities in life and so on, and that vision is now discerned and it is revealed through in the process of unfolding the values themselves, in unfolding the means, since means and end are coinciding here. As we look at the means, there the vision of the Vedanta will also emerge as we examine these values. So that will be the subject matter of this class. And there's a text written by my guru, Swami Dayananda Saraswati, published in 2015, Sadhana Panchakam. So this is a text for a reference. I won't necessarily follow verbatim the text, but it'll this book, but it will be helpful reference matter. And as I said beginning, we will use the commentary, the Balakrishnananda Swami commentary and Kiranavali commentary to look at the verses in great depth. So that's how it's going to be. And as usual, when I teach, the class notes are the material that the student will use as the slides from my classes. And if there is a certain exposure to Vedanta Shastra, it is helpful, and ability to read Sanskrit also will be helpful. But all lectures will be in English, and where I use Sanskrit text, and the expansion of those texts will always be only in English. So, but to somebody who knows a little bit of Sanskrit, then the Sanskrit text will be helpful to appreciate the course content more. Usually it's 90 minutes class, but we will have ample time for discussion. And any time classroom participation is not only welcome, but it is encouraged, so that as and when a subject matter is discussed, students can clear their doubts. So with this, I will conclude with the Shanti Mantra. Then we will open up for any questions you may have about the subject matter and what I discussed today, and I'll be happy to answer. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Sishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om Tat Sat Brahmarpanamastu Krishnarpanamastu. Om.
Wonderful. You do such a clear explanation and the depth, and it's just amazing. So let me launch the poll. Just let us know if you're interested in the course. I've put the details. It's going to be on Mondays at 8 p.m. Eastern, starting October 14th. And so let's see what questions we have. Nobody's put anything in the Q&A box. I've got Kumu Gupta ji who's raised her hand. We'll give her the first crack at it. Kumuji, you can unmute and ask Dr. Swaminathan your question.
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, hi. So I just, first of all, I want to say it's nice to see you here. I too have a background in material science. I have a master's actually from New York. So my point is that I often think of this example. It's like, I think it's called kasturi, it's like in the navel of the deer, and it keeps searching around for the nice smell that where it's coming from, but it's actually in the navel of the deer. I'm not able to say that properly, but that's kind of the example what you were saying about the glasses being on top of the head and you're looking for the glasses, something like that. If you can formulate it for me.
No, I think you are right. There are ample examples where we already have something and we look for them. So the deer example, which is looking for the fragrance that is already in its own body, but it is looking for that fragrance, and also things like which we falsely conclude about certain things also are examples here. For example, although the sun doesn't rise or doesn't set, looking at the sun rise and set, one concludes if the sun is going around the earth. That is a false conclusion. Of course, now we know that it is not so, but that's how we concluded. Or you look at the mirage water on a hot day when you are traveling on a road, and you see that there seems like water, but in fact it is a mirage water due to the refraction effects of the light. So therefore, the conclusions that sometimes we make about things based on only the appearance can be erroneous. Here, about the self also is based on certain appearances of our daily experiences, the way we perceive them. We erroneously conclude about the reality of them. Experience only gives you data, but if you conclude something about the reality, then it misleads you. So that's the situation here about the self. So the glasses on the forehead is just an example.
Thank you, Kumuji, for always being on our webinars and supporting and asking interesting questions. Geetaji, yes, the recordings will be made available. We'll send it to everyone who registered, probably like 2 days after we complete this. We'll include any links Dr. Swaminathan wants us to share, and the details for this course. Yes, this course will only be on Monday. It's a once a week 1.5 hour course. Dr. Swaminathan has offered many courses now at HUA, and depending on the quarter and the subject, they're at different times. Maybe you could just go into that a little bit, and how you've had different batches, what you've covered, and how this is kind of a progression. And I hope if anybody's taken a course with Dr. Swaminathan in the past, please raise your hand and let us know how it was, and if you'd like to engage and give a little testimonial. Yes, this course is 1 credit hour, so that is a $200 course. We have some scholarships available. I'll put some details in the chat on that if you are financially constrained and still want to enroll. Dr. Swaminathan, maybe you could just talk about some of the courses and how you progress. I know you've taught a few now at HUA and how this fits in. And
I have taught the introduction to the Shanti mantras. The mantras, couple of them I chanted today. There are 10 Shanti mantras that are customarily repeated or recited the beginning of every class in a traditional classroom setting. So we examine those verses in the great depth. because the Shanti Mantras themselves convey the vision. Then we looked at Dakshinamurti Ashtakam. This Dakshinamurti Ashtakam is the magnum opus of Shankaracharya, attributed to Shankaracharya, where he condenses the essence of all the Upanishadic doctrines in set of 8 plus 2. There are 10 verses. And again, the greatness of that text is Shankaracharya's disciple, chief disciple, Sureshwaracharya. Sureshwaracharya has written a Vartikam on the Dakshinamurti Ashtakam. That's called Manasollasa. So with the Vartikam, with the appropriate verses from the Vartikam, we studied that subject. And that was a very, very, very profound subject. Then we taught Adhyasa Bhashya. Adhyasa Bhashya is an introductory Bhashya of Shankaracharya to the Brahma Sutram. Brahma Sutram is of Vyasa. But before beginning the commentary on the Vyasa's sutras, 550 sutras or so, Shankara writes about 3-4 pages of an introduction called in the tradition as Adhyasa Bhashyam. That is the crown jewel of Shankara's contribution to the Advaita Vedantic philosophy, if you will, wherein the fundamental tenet of the human error and how that human error comes about, and the examination of that error itself. When you define the problem well, then your solution is very simple. Defining the problem, what the problem is more than 50% of the solution. So here in the Adhyasa Bhashya, Shankara defines the problem so beautifully, so profoundly, marvelously. Then the solution, that Vedanta is the solution for that problem, it becomes like having a gooseberry on your Astamalakavat on your palm. So it is as clear as what you have in your hand. So we studied that profound text in one of the courses. So that's how, these are the 3 that I have taught so far. But I taught other classes to my students on Zoom classes, many classes. So.
Great. Thank you for going into that. It just shows the depth and the breadth of Dr. Swaminathan's own understanding and what we're trying to do at Hindu University of America.
Right.
So this course, again, I put the details in the chat. It's going to be 8 p.m. Eastern time. So we're trying to do it after work. I know West Coast, it's a little bit difficult, but doing it online, we try to make it as accessible to as many people as possible. Vijayaji, I'm going to look into the recordings. I'm sorry if they haven't been sent out. We've been pretty busy this week with the Waves conference, this Yuva conference. That's all going on at the same time. So we're multitasking and our team is a little stretched, but I'll look into that, Vijayaji. Thank you for sharing. So that is kind of it on the questions and the comments. Last chance to ask or comment or get in on this webinar before I hand it to Dr. Swaminathan for closing statements. If you didn't fill in the poll, let us know. I see about 10 maybes. If you're a maybe, ask your question and let's see if we can get you off the fence and enrolled. About 6 people said yes, they're going to take the course. Awesome. Let's get you enrolled as soon as possible. That always is nice for us on the admin side, knowing that we got this course and enrollments going on. So let me give that last a chance to ask a question or make a comment, and then I will give it to Dr. Swaminathan. If you're still, yes, this course will definitely count towards the certificate program in Hindu Studies. I think it's an elective class, though. It's not one of the core classes. And we're continuing to update and refresh as it goes on. Thank you, Dr. Lindamood, for asking that question. Glad to see you on, or at least get your question in the chat here. Okay, with that, let me hand it back to Dr. Swaminathan for And Dr. Lindamood is asking, what is the name of the book that you're going to be using?
The book goes by the title of the course, Sadhana Panchakam. It's the same. It is by the same name, the book. It is the lecture given by my Guru Dayananda Saraswati and transcribed and edited and brought out as a book. So that book will discuss all the 5 verses and there will be Swamiji's commentary on them. The book is in English, so that will be a good reference material if you take the class.
Okay, great. All right, Dr. Swaminathan, it's always a pleasure to have you on. You so eloquently and with depth explain such difficult and complicated ideas and make them accessible. That's what we're here for. So Dr. Swaminathan, let me hand it to you for closing comments. And if you want to end on a mantra or shloka, of course.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Dhanyawad, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Ankurji. Thank you all for taking the time on a Saturday, noon time or whatever time zone that you are in. I'll just say only this much. Some of you may be thinking of taking the class. Some of you may be not sure about taking it. Some of you may be, maybe this is not for me or whatever reasons, doesn't matter. But these there is no introductory text as such in Vedanta Sastra. Because you take any text, see, the vision of the Vedas is just one. And the Vedanta is part of the Vedas. Vedas is voluminous, but interestingly, it doesn't have multiple visions. It has only one vision. The one vision is there is one absolute reality, the oneness, which is like a thread connecting the diversity in the creation. We perceive diversity. Our perception indicates there is diversity. But in answering someone's question, I was saying, we have to examine our perception. So perception, no doubt, is a bread and butter for how we interact with the world, with the creation, how we interact with each other. But sometimes we have to examine whether the perceptive data is in fact indicates the underlying reality of the creation. So that is a very big question and inquiry one should make. The human life is rare. I could have been born as anything, but I'm born as a human being with an intellect. And that intellect has to be used to see this oneness. And the vision of the Vedas is revealing this oneness. So you take any text, you can take a profound Upanishad like the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, voluminous Upanishad. You can take a simple Upanishad like the Ishavasya Upanishad. You can take the Brahma Sutra of Veda Vyasa, 550 sutras, aphorisms, which discusses the entire literature. You can take Puranic literature. You can take Srimad Bhagavatam. You can take Idikasas, Ramayana, Mahabharata. You can take anything in the Sanatana Dharma literature. Anything. The message is this vision. So one should not think that I'm going to take suppose if you are a student who has taken many classes before, this cannot be treated as an introductory text. Every text is self-contained and it reveals the vision. The more you study, the more love you will gain for the study. That is how the Shastra is. So this will be a very useful course if you have not taken this subject before. Even if you have studied other Upanishads or whatever, this will still be an interesting class. So you please consider taking it and pursue your pursuit of knowledge. So Hari Om, thank you. So have a good day. So namaste. Okay, so if there are no other questions, then I will drop out of the conference.